Welcome back. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on draft night. The first round of the 2022 NFL Draft takes place tonight, a big night for the New York Jets. And I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day, Monday through Friday. Tonight we have a special Thursday night episode right before the beginning of the 2022 NFL Draft. A very important draft for the New York Jets. Coming off a 4-win season, this team is looking for big improvements, and there's no way to improve your team quicker than by drafting impact players through the NFL Draft, and the Jets have plenty of early picks. In fact, they have 2 of the top 10 picks as we begin the night, and there are rumors about a potential big trade in the works. We'll see whether or not it happens. It's not clear whether it's going to happen, but today we heard multiple reports from both coasts, both from reporters in San Francisco and in New York, that Deebo Samuel to the Jets could still happen. There was talk that it could even happen when the Jets are on the clock. Now, the 49ers are not going to call up the Jets for the first time at pick 10. And a trade like this cannot be done in 10 minutes. You're only on the clock for 10 minutes tonight with each pick. So if a trade is going to happen, it's probably already been made. The teams have probably already agreed to the key points of it, what would go to San Francisco in return for Deebo Samuel. You would assume the Jets have already worked out a contract extension with Deebo Samuel. If these things are not done right before the draft, probably not going to happen. But it'll be interesting because the talk was that there might be a specific player the 49ers are interested in. So what happens in situations like this typically is that teams work out a deal. They say, if we're going to make a trade, let's have this done so that we're not negotiating, so we're not under the clock here, so we don't have to do this all in 10 minutes. Let's work this out, and then let's check back in when you're on the clock. If we're both amenable to a trade, then we'll make it. That's the way this could work tonight. But it'll be interesting to see what the Jets did on Thursday. I did the regular Locked On Jets episode. I talked about the different paths the Jets could take. They could potentially try and bolster their defensive line by adding an edge rusher at 4, and part of this depends on what happens in front of them. It seems like the strength of this year's draft class is at 4. It seems like the strength of this year's draft class is at the edge position, but it's also possible, and we don't really know what Houston's going to do. At this point, it kind of seems like the consensus is that edge rushers are going to go 1-2, but what happens at 3? Houston, they could go corner, they could go offensive line, they could do a couple different things. It's entirely possible edge rushers go 1-2-3. Aiden Hutchinson, Trayvon Walker, Kayvon Thibodeau. If that happens, it opens up an interesting scenario for the Jets. Do they go offensive line? Do they go corner? There's been a lot of buzz about potentially Sauce Gardner, the corner out of Cincinnati. Over the last couple of days, it's been nothing but Jets talk about Sauce Gardner. So lots of different ways the Jets could go here. And then once we get to pick 10, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, whether the Deebo Samuel rumors come true. And I have to say, I think while it's possible this thing could drag on for another night, it's possible Deebo Samuel could get traded for some second-round picks. It's possible this could even drag into the summer. And we've certainly seen this. We saw it a couple of years ago when the Jamal Adams situation was resolved right before training camp and a trade was made well after the draft. But you would have to think that it's more likely than not that either Deebo Samuel is getting traded to the Jets tonight, or it's probably not going to happen. I would say at least the odds are significantly lower of a Deebo Samuel trade happening to the Jets if it doesn't happen by the time the Jets make the 10th pick. But I would have bet that the trade would have had to be made before the draft, and apparently there are rumors that potentially something could happen during the draft when the Jets are on the clock, and it all could depend on whether there's a player the 49ers want at 10. And, of course, you have to remember the 49ers do not have a first-round pick this year because they traded up last year for Trey Lance. Now, obviously, they're trading Deebo Samuel. They may need to draft Deebo Samuel's replacement, so it could be a bit of a catch-22 for San Francisco, but still, very interesting situation tonight. We'll have to see what happens. I'm inclined to think the Jets are probably going to take a defensive end at 4. My guess is that Houston, we don't know what Houston's going to do. My guess is that Houston's probably not taking a defensive end at 3, and it just seems unlikely to me, but who knows? It's the NFL draft. Anything can happen, and I think one thing you've learned about the NFL draft is that if you've watched through the years, it's that predictions are relatively pointless to make. You never know what's going to happen at the NFL draft. So it'd be very interesting to see tonight. And of course, there's also the possibility the Jets have a pick at 35 in the second round. If a player they want falls, to 25, 26, 27, they could move up. They could add a third first round pick. Now, there's one catch, is that in the past you used to do this because you got a fifth year option, because players drafted in the first round have a fifth year team option with their contracts. There have been changes to that mechanism through the league, so it's not quite as valuable as it used to be. Essentially, if a guy's really good, you're paying him like he's an elite player in that fifth year option, whereas in the past it used to be kind of a discount if the player was elite. So there's not as much of an incentive to move up into the first round to get that fifth year option on an elite level player. But it's another thing to watch, because this is not viewed as a draft with a ton of elite talent. So, and a lot of these picks are going to come down to scheme fit. So a player who fits the Jets may not fit another team. So the Jets, if there could be a player who really fits the Jets well, who falls down the boards, and the Jets may want to go up and get him late in the first round. So that's another thing to watch. I mean, I don't think you could turn your TV off at all tonight if you're a Jets fan, because you begin the night with pick number 4. We're waiting to see what happens there, and then I think the real drama, especially at the receiver position, will move to pick 10 when Deebo Samuel potentially could be available, and there have been all sorts of rumors about that. But you can't even really turn off your TV at all tonight, because sitting there, at 35, the Jets could decide to move back into the first round. So it should be a very eventful night, and you never know you always underestimate how quickly your team can improve if you do the right thing. If you draft well, things turn around very quickly, and that's especially true if you have a young quarterback who really develops. To me, the biggest thing is draft great players. It's not so much the positions, but I think the Jets need to leave this tonight with at least one premium offensive player, because I think they have to help Zach Wilson out. They've made some decent moves, I think, in free agency, but there's no big-time player. I don't think the offense has gotten appreciably better during the offseason after free agency. So whether it's a trade, whether it's a pick, get another premium player for Zach Wilson. I'd prefer it be a wide receiver, but even if it's like an offensive lineman and you're going to build a real good power running attack and kind of help Zach out that way, keep him in reasonable downs and distances, maybe it's a Kwanu at 4, that would be acceptable to me. But I feel like even as bad as the defense is, I would be questioning the plan a little bit if the Jets don't add at least one premium player for Zach on the offensive side of the ball. Anyway, that's all for our brief draft preview show tonight. Now head over to the Locked On NFL YouTube page for our live coverage of the NFL Draft. We'll be live all throughout the draft, covering every round and every pick, and you may see me stop by there, visit a couple of my friends hosting the show. I hope you have a great night, everybody, and tune in tomorrow for a new episode of Locked On Jets, as I'll break down what happened in the first round.